Hello and welcome. If you haven't already, I invite you to please click subscribe. There's no obligation, and it allows you to be notified of all new chapters. Additional information about the story, including the author, chapter warnings, and rating, can be found in the description below. All credit goes to the original author. All That Remains by Orphan Account, Chapter 19, Pranks, Bonding, and Meetings. Third Age, 2957, 54 years ago. The moment Legolas stepped into the last homely house, he knew something was amiss. The home of Elrond, his family, and his close advisors and friends was silent. Unlike usual, there were no servants bustling about, and no warriors walking through the city as they headed out on patrol or to go train. Instead, the halls were empty and everything was silent. Cautiously, the assassin backed away from the front door, instead choosing to enter through a second-story window. He came into what appeared to be a study, books and papers lying morosely on a desk in the center of the room. The violet-eyed elf unsheathed a dagger and entered the hall. He could sense the presences of elves around the building, all in rooms or out in the forest. Odd, but it was almost like they were hiding. Legolas moved soundlessly through the stone hallway, senses alert as he searched for threats. He did not sense the presences of any enemies, though the shadowed elves' tainted energy made him cringe. All he sensed were elves, and one man. Aragorn was here then, with the twins to be exact. Suspicion crept into the assassin's thoughts, but before he could follow it, a familiar cry sounded through the air. It was shocked, sharp, and slightly pained, but Legolas was moving before his mind had fully registered the sound. He recognized the voice, despite the walls between them. It was Glorfindel. The assassin sped down the hall towards where the Balrog Slayer's shout had come from, halting outside the door next to the room he knew his big brother was in. He dashed into the room, opened the window, and swung his body out and sideways to the left. He smashed through the window in the next room, landing on his feet in a battle-ready stance. His violet eyes took in the scene in front of him in a heartbeat. Glorfindel was tied to the rafters in blankets, struggling uselessly in an attempt to get down. Near the door, Aragorn, Elladan, and Elrohir were laughing hysterically as they watched the Balrog Slayer's failure to free himself from the trap. "You walked right into that one, Whoa!" Elladan's taunt was cut off abruptly as Esgil leapt in through the window, shattering the glass and looking ready for battle. His violet eyes were narrowed dangerously, his knives were out, and his teeth were bared in a predatory snarl. Legolas did not speak, merely staring at the three pranksters with calculating eyes. Despite themselves, the three brothers quailed under his gaze. His arm flicked, and 4 throwing knives flew free of his hands. The weapon sliced through the mix of ropes and blankets that had caught his brother, cutting him free. The Vanyar plummeted a couple of feet before he twisted, landing with the agility taught to him by the assassin. He straightened, walked over to Legolas, and gave him a smile. "Thank you, Gwador." The violet-eyed elf was still staring neutrally at the 3 sons of Elrond. "I suppose you 3 are the reason everyone is hiding in their rooms," he said flatly. "Yes," Aragorn admitted hesitantly. "We were bored," Elladan explained. "Ada gave us free rein for the week. I'm surprised, seeing as how Thranduil, Baraneth, and Fael are here." Legolas's eyebrow slowly crept up towards his forehead, and for a moment the 3 perpetrators were eerily reminded of their father. "Where are they?" "Thranduil and Baraneth are with Ada in his study," Elrohir reported, growing bolder since the assassin was not threatening them with pointy objects. Yet. "Fael is," The younger twin paused and exchanged a horrified glance with his brothers. Blasted idiots! Devious fiends! If you don't let me down, I swear to Eru I will kill you all!" An enraged and familiar voice screamed from a distance. Aragorn paled and scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "I think we forgot to let him down." Oops. Legolas was already out the door, headed towards Fael's furious shouts. He entered the dining hall and looked up. Fael was suspended close to the ceiling, dressed in what looked like a type of sheet and with black paint covering his face, his hair sticking up at odd angles. The prince spotted the assassin and almost cried with relief. "Esgol, help me down." The violet-eyed elf nodded and ran at the wall, scaling the stone blocks as easily as a squirrel climbed trees. He launched off the wall, clutching to the contraption keeping Fael aloft, and forcing a surprised yelp from the elf. "Careful," he yelped, then blanched. "How did you even get up?" "Hold on to the ropes, but your right hand," Legolas interrupted, businesslike. Fael did as he asked, clinging to the rope. The assassin did as well, slashing through the other rope and letting it fall. The silver-haired prince grunted as the support holding him fell away, swinging down towards the ground and forming a rope and bedsheet rope that would allow them to climb down closer to the ground rather than drop from the height. The two descended quickly, Fael gasping in relief as his feet touched the ground. Wild-eyed, the prince hugged the assassin, making him gasp in surprise, and was almost sobbing into his shoulder. Legolas patted Fael's hair awkwardly, trying to pull away, but the prince refused to let him go. "Thank the Valor that you are here. They've been pranking and ganging up on me all week," he hysterically wailed. "You're not the only one," Glorfindel muttered, crossing his arms and glowering at the three dark-haired males, who put on expressions of innocence no one fell for. At that moment, the assassin broke out of the frazzled, silver-haired elf's hold and turned to the sons of Elrond. He did not break his silence, and only stared at them, an odd emotion in his eyes. Then he smiled, and Aragorn and the twins swore it was the most terrifying smile that they had ever seen. He spoke, in a voice that was soft and calm, but chilled the three to the bone. "This means war." The assassin walked away, and instinctively Glorfindel and Fael went with him, exiting the dining room and leaving the dark-haired male standing frozen next to the makeshift rope. Elladan slowly turned to his brothers, face pale. "We're dead." The others could not contradict his statement. The next morning, 3 screams were heard as 3 certain pranksters awoke from their sleep. Elrond and Thranduil, who were conversing about nothing in particular while walking through the halls, halted in their discussion, looking in the direction of the bedrooms with surprise. A snicker from the shadows made them turn, and both were again stunned to see Fael standing there, a triumphant look upon his face. "What has pleased you so greatly, my son?" the Elven King asked hesitantly, not sure he wanted to know. The silver-haired prince bared his teeth in a sadistic grin. "Justice has been served," he proclaimed darkly and walked away cackling. The 2 elf lords looked at each other, wearing almost identical expressions of worry and alarm. Then Thranduil broke eye contact, shrugging amiably. "They brought it upon themselves, Elrond." The Paradel just sighed heavily. "I'm going back to my study to hide." He hurried away. A moment later, the sounds of rapid, stumbling footsteps sounded through the halls, heading towards the Elven King. He stepped out of the way as 3 Elith, with shocking pink hair, burst into the hall, shouting and ranting in rather manly voices. I cannot believe he actually did this, the Elith in the blue dress cried, and the Sindar recognized Aragorn's voice. Was that really Aragorn beneath all of that pink and cosmetics? Ah, yes it was. Thranduil could see that stubbly beard the ranger was wont to have. I can't walk in this, the Elith in the purple dress complained, and by the tone the Elven King guessed it was Elladan. The older twin hoisted up the skirt of his dress, muttering angrily. Where could he have hidden our clothes? The last Elith, whose red dress clashed terribly with his pink hair, spoke up. He probably put them out in the woods. He wouldn't have burned them, right? I think he might have, Aragorn said darkly. He was pretty angry that we pranked his Gwador and Fail all week. The ranger trailed off, having just spotted their stunned spectators standing at the edge of the hall. The man turned a red so bright it was visible through the cosmetics Esgil has put on the man. The Sindar did not know where Esgil had learned how to apply makeup like that, but whoever had taught him did a fantastic job. On women, the blush, eyeliner, and color the assassin had added would have enhanced the wearer's beauty to the extreme. On the males, it was absolutely hilarious. Elven King Thranduil, Aragorn squeaked, drawing the twins' attention to the stunned elf. You wouldn't happen to know where Esgil put our clothes, would you? Thranduil stared, and stared, and stared some more. Then his composure shattered. Ha 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 ha, the Elven King guffawed, laughing so hard his stomach hurt. He doubled over, chortling in a most not elfish way, while the three victims looked on with mortification. They backed away from the cackling Sindar, fleeing in order to continue their quest to find appropriate clothes. They knew they would not be able to find the assassin responsible for their humiliation, which only made the prank all the better. For Esgil, that was. We need to exploit his weaknesses and draw him out into the open, Elladan hissed, thoughts filled with ideas on how to get back at the violet-eyed elf. With that in mind, the three, after borrowing clothes from a few sniggering warriors and washing the cosmetics off of their faces, began to hunt down Fail and Glorfindel. They would have looked quite murderous and dangerous, if not for the fact that their hair was still pink. Whatever Esgil had used, it was not coming out. Their targets were not in their rooms, the kitchen, dining room, training grounds, studies, Elrond's study, which they were specifically told to stay away from, or the healing ward. That left one place they could be if they had not fled to the woods. The three now pink-haired males crept to the library door, opening it carefully and peering inside. Sure enough, there their targets were, reading books and smirking to themselves. And next to them, dusting the shelves, was Aristor. There was only one place where pranks were not allowed, ever, if you valued your life. Aristor did not tolerate anyone threatening his precious books, and if they did, the result was not pretty. As it was, the advisor could smell a prank from a mile away, and would not let the three sons of Elrond into the library at all if he sensed something was up. And so, when Aristor turned away from his dusting and glared at the three pink-haired pranksters, they did not bother stepping foot in the advisor's sanctuary. Slowly, like they were backing away from a mother bear with cubs, they quietly shut the door, running off down the hall so fast one would think a ring-wraith was chasing them. Once they were far enough away, Aragorn turned to his brothers, scowling deeply. Now what? They can't stay in there forever, Elrohir growled, pushing his pink hair out of his face. Who are you talking about? Esgil's voice sounded from behind them, sweetly innocent. The three turned towards him, like cats sighting an injured bird. Get him! Elladan shouted. The assassin took off running, laughing all the way as the enraged trio ran after him. Nazgûl led them on a merry chase through the hidden valley, much faster than them and able to easily keep ahead by using his agility and acrobatics. He ran on rooftops, sprang off of walls, and dodged through tight spaces without slowing in the slightest. His 3 pursuers, meanwhile, were not as agile and were forced to run after him on the ground. After an hour of chasing, Nazgûl abruptly halted in a clearing near the last homely house, just inside the forest. Instantly on guard, the trio spread out around the assassin, watching him warily. "Hello, Estelle," the violet-eyed elf said chirpily. "I love what you've done with your hair." The ranger glowered at him. "Tell me how to get this out," he commanded. Nazgûl's head tipped, and he smiled infuriatingly at the 3. "Why should I?" "Because if you do not," Elladan threatened, stepping forward, "we will prank you so—" "You'd have to catch me first," the assassin pointed out perkily. "We have caught you," Elrohir proclaimed. 3 to 1. I'm liking these odds. A glint appeared in the assassin's eyes. "You should know better than to rely on superior numbers. But I suppose that I'm feeling nice today. You wash out the hair dye with alcohol." Aragorn blinked in surprise. "Alcohol?" "Yes. Wine, beer, ale, any kind will do," Nazgûl said, still smiling innocently. Then the grin shifted, turning into a predatory smirk. "You know what? I feel terrible about ruining your lovely hair. Let my friends help you fix it." Around them, the trees rustled, and the Noldor half-elves and Dúnedain human realized they had forgotten a very important detail about a certain wood elf. The light trees around Rivendell liked him more than them. Nazgûl's expression was triumphant and sadistically gleeful. "How are you liking these odds?" he asked in mock curiosity. The 3 pink-haired males looked up, eyes widening in horror as the trees upturned the barrels of alcohol they had in their branches, the contents rushing down towards the pink-haired males. Aragorn had time for a single word. "No." Then the river of smelly liquid was upon them. The prank war was declared over later that day, and it was undeniably Legolas's team that won. The twins and Aragorn had admitted defeat after falling into a syrup trap set by the assassin and being stuck in it while the assassin, and their former victims, cheerfully stood there and mocked them. After 5 hours, the 3 promised to never prank Fael or Glorfindel, or try to prank Legolas, ever again, or else. The 3 still smelled like stale ale from the trees dousing them. Surprisingly, the mixture actually did take out the pink hair dye, returning their hair to its natural dark shade. Having decided that putting the prank war behind him was in his best interest, Aragorn questioned the assassin about the dye, curious as to why only alcohol would wash it out. "The dye is special," Legolas explained. "It's meant for use in undercover missions where a change in hair color is necessary. It would not do for the dye to wash out in the middle of the mission, so having a specific neutralizer that the person will most likely not come into contact with is beneficial." "And the cosmetics?" the ranger demanded. "You did surprisingly well with them." Legolas snickered despite himself. "Did I make you feel pretty, Hope?" The ranger turned red and glared at him. "No, but I've seen human women wearing makeup." The assassin sobered, shrugging. "It is another disguise technique. If I wanted to, I could use cosmetics to make myself look like an old human man." "Your father really did teach you a lot, didn't he?" Aragorn murmured, impressed. "Yes," Legolas said softly, looking away. The distant grief prodded at him once, before fading, and he put on a determined face. "Have you seen Glorfindel? I need to give him something. I didn't have the chance before." "Last I checked, he was in the training grounds," the man offered. The assassin nodded in thanks and hurried towards the spot, only to halt in the middle of the hall. His head turned in the direction of the main entrance, and he frowned thoughtfully. New elves had come to Rivendell, and they were just arriving in the last homely house. They seemed familiar, but only distantly so. Still, 2 of their auras were shockingly bright, even brighter than Glorfindel's when he let his glow out fully. Curious, the violet-eyed elf headed towards the main entrance. He leapt up to the roof and ran along them, leaping from rooftop to rooftop. He halted on the one closest to the main entrance, peering over the edge carefully. Elrond had finally crept out from hiding in his study and was standing beside Aristor, Thranduil, Fael, Baraneth, and the twins, who were now dressed in their own clothes after Legolas had finally given them back. They were greeting 6 elves, but Legolas's focus was on the golden-haired Eleth and Elend clothed in white. Both glowed with the brilliant light he had sensed, bright, powerful, and beautiful. He could identify them now, their companions as well, and subconsciously checked to make sure his mental shields were fully up. No offense to the Lady of the Light, but he did not want his memories explored. Far down on the ground, being greeted by the Rivendell party, were Lady Galadriel and Lord Celeborn of Lothlorien. The Lord and Lady of the Light were indeed a sight to behold, and seeing them with their inner lights blazing, Legolas could not help but feel his old insecurities creeping up on him. He banished them immediately, reminding himself of the promise he had made in Mirkwood. None of the elves had noticed him yet, so he took the time to study the Lord and Lady's 4 companions. The one in the red cloak was Haldir, the March Warden of Lorien. Beside him were 2 elves that the assassin recognized as the warrior's brothers, Rumil and Orifin. The last elf, an Eleth, was being hugged warmly by the twins. She had dark hair, and even from a distance Legolas could see her silver eyes. She must be Arwen, Elrond's daughter, he thought. Their conversation drifted over to his sharp ears. "I didn't know you were coming for a visit, Arwen," Elrohir was saying happily. "I was unaware as well," Elrond added, looking at the Lord and Lady. Concern flashed across his features, making his brow furrow and his mouth dip into a frown. "Has something happened?" "No," Celeborn answered lightly. "We just wish to come and visit family." The Paradel relaxed, a weary smile appearing on his face. "That is a luxury we rarely receive lately." Arwen broke her hug with Elladan, her nose wrinkling slightly. "You both smell terrible, like a bar. Did you drink too much last night?" The twins turned red. Well," Elladan stuttered. "You see," Elrohir began. "They got in a prank war and lost," Fael revealed helpfully. His friends glared at him. "Prank war?" Aristor scoffed. "It was more like a prank massacre. Their hair was turned pink. They woke up in dresses and with women's dresses on. They had alcohol dumped on them. They were chased by a variety of animals, including squirrels, a deer, foxes, and our horses. We remember, all right," Elladan snapped irritably. Arwen stared at him, alarm in her eyes at the thought of someone beating her brothers and pranking. She paused, worry becoming more evident. "Is Estelle all right? Why isn't he here?" "He is inside somewhere, most likely in the kitchen getting food," the younger twin rushed to assure his sister. "We didn't know you were coming, remember?" The tension in the Elvenstar's posture faded, and she smiled wryly. "So you did not take revenge on him for pranking you?" The twins scowled at her. "You think it was Estelle who managed to defeat us?" Elladan growled insulted. Up on the roof, Legolas tensed. It was Haldir who asked the inevitable question. Then who was it? He knew how good the infamous twins were at pranking, and was curious as to who had managed to outprank them so thoroughly. The hiding assassin closed his eyes, breathing out deeply. I am not afraid of their reactions. I am not ashamed of who I am. If they are confrontational and cold, it does not matter, he told himself, and knew it was the truth. He was not afraid any more, and even though he would rather avoid Baroneth, there was no reason to stay hiding. He leapt down to the ground, silent as a shadow, and spoke in his soft, lilting voice. That would be me. All of the elves, except Elrond, Thranduil, Galadriel, and Celeborn, jumped in surprise. The fiery princess of Mirkwood started scowling the moment she spotted the assassin, but Legolas ignored her, walking up to stand next to the Elven King. The Sindar subconsciously shifted closer to the young elf, flashing him a reassuring smile. Legolas found himself looking into bright blue eyes as the Lady of the Light looked upon him. She looked as young as any of the Eldar, but her eyes revealed her true wisdom and age. There was knowing in her gaze, her eyes having seen many things that were, are, and might yet be. The assassin could not focus on the other elves, because he knew, deep inside himself, that it was Galadriel that needed to accept him. If she did, the other Lothlorien elves would as well. After a pause that seemed to stretch on, but only lasted a short moment, the golden-haired Eleth spoke. "Hello, young one," the beautiful lady murmured. "I am glad you have chosen to reveal yourself to us at last." And just like that, everyone relaxed. Darnanath, Daradar, Arwen, Elrohir began. This is Esgol. He's the one that defeated us so thoroughly, the twin added grudgingly. You pranked Fael and Gwador all week, Legolas said flatly. You deserve it. Gwador? Haldir repeated with surprise. You have a brother? He and Lord Glorfindel are heart brothers, Elrond explained for the young elf. The three Lothlorien brothers and Arwen looked at the assassin with a mixture of surprise and respect. Legolas internally winced. Why must they always stare at me? He lamented silently, unnerved. Oddly enough, it was Galadriel that came to his rescue. Could you walk with me, Esgol? She asked him. There was something in her voice that made the violet-eyed elf pause. He looked into her solemn, wise eyes and realized it was not a random request. She wished to speak with him for some reason. The assassin nodded, and slowly the two elves walked out of the last homely house, strolling leisurely beneath the trees. It was the Noldor that broke the silence. You are quite the unique elf, young one. Her tone was not cruel or judging, but Legolas still tensed slightly. Yes, I am who I am. Indeed, she said. You remained hidden for a long time, even my sight unable to see you. May I ask why you kept in the shadows and avoided the elves for so long? The assassin shifted nervously, looking up at the trees for comfort. I physically hid from the elves because I was afraid that they would judge me, at first. Then I gained a feeling, whenever I thought of revealing myself to large groups of them. It was only later that I learned I was unconsciously hiding from the elves who are... He stopped, wondering if the lady knew about the shadowed elves. I am aware of the darkness that has taken hold in some of our kin, she told him. It was not them you hid from, but the darkness inside. Do you know what it is, my lady? He asked her. She did not respond, looking upon him with eyes too wise for her deceptively young face. "Even now you hide," Galadriel murmured. "Your glow is suppressed deep within you." "Can you sense it?" Legolas asked hesitantly. She smiled mysteriously. "Yes and no. I know it is there, but I cannot sense it. It is your protection and your shield. In turn, it is also protected by remaining within you, instead of being out in the harshness of this world." She turned away from him, reaching out and touching one of the trees around them. It reacted to her touch, rustling softly. A sad expression crossed the fair Elith's face, and her wise blue eyes slowly closed. "The elves are fading, losing our strength and power. It is the least prominent in our kin in Mirkwood, but the darkness is harming us even there." She looked at him with knowing eyes. "You know why?" "Yes," he stated simply. "Elves are creatures of light, and their glow is an extension of their soul. The touch of the shadow is harming them, slowly weakening them." "Yes," Galadriel said. "That is why so many of our kin seek healing in the West. That is why, after the shadow is defeated, we must leave Middle-earth. We may linger for a few centuries more, but we must eventually depart or fade. For even after the darkness is destroyed, it will linger in this land, for its hold is too deep to be vanquished completely. The golden trees will die, the old ways will fade, and this world will become man's." She stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm, looking upon him with all of her wisdom. "But you are different, young Esgil. You shielded yourself, taking your glow within you to protect it, strengthening it by keeping it away from the darkness's touch." Her gaze darkened. "I cannot see your future, your mind or your soul, but there is one thing my instincts tell me that I must ask you to do." Galadriel became firm and determined, the image of the Lady of the Light, and spoke softly into Legolas's ear. "Do not let your inner light shine. Do not allow it out from within you. Keep it safe around your heart and soul. Keep it strong and growing stronger, free of the darkness's poison." "Why?" the assassin asked, confused. "A darkness is coming to this land, one of great power that even I do not know the extent of. An ancient creature that never should have been awakened is coming, so deep in the shadow that I cannot see nor identify it." The Lady of Lothlorien looked to the south, where far in the distance Mordor lay. "Something has happened that was not meant to, disrupting the flow of time and changing the future. Not all prophecies are meant to be, and sometimes new prophecies are formed because of an action unforeseen by all. I fear that Sauron will not be the great darkness that we must defeat in order for peace to come to Arda. But I do know this: you will be needed before the end of this war, in more ways than you know." "My lady, you are wise, and you see and know so much." The violet-eyed elf stared at her, slightly overwhelmed. Then he cleared his throat. Do you know who my family is?" There was such fragile hope in his voice that Galadriel felt a piece of her heart shatter. She pulled him into a hug, the elf stiffening before relaxing against her. She gently touched his hair, avoiding his braids, and held him close as if by doing so she could erase all of the pain, sorrow, and loss he had suffered. Legolas let himself stay in the Noldor's embrace, trying to recall if his mother had ever held him like this. He could not remember. He could not even bring up the memory of her death anymore. He did not remember her face, her hair color, or her eyes. His last memory from before Dol Guldur had faded. Only the knowledge that his mother had been killed by orcs remained. Now, reminded of the fact, Legolas wanted to weep. "I do not know where you come from, young one," Galadriel said softly, eyes distant. "Your past, present, and future are all hidden from me. But do not lose hope, Esgol. When the time is right, you will find them. If they are even alive," the pale, blonde-haired elf thought, but did not say. "Thank you," he whispered and pulled away. "I must go now. I have to find Glorfindel." The light lady laughed, a beautiful, heartening sound. "I am glad that Glorfindel has found a brother," she said with a half-smile. "Go find him." Unsure of what to say, Legolas bowed slightly and hurried away, finally heading off to find his brother.